Hello, everybody, and good morning. My name is Laura Boyko. Thank you for joining us. I'm with Global Leadership Initiatives, and I'll be your webinar host this morning. I'm so excited to bring to you this month's GLI webinar entitled Meaningful Partnerships at Work with Dr. Seth Silver and Dr. Timothy Franz. We have about 15 people registered with us this morning, and people are still joining us. If you can let us know in the chat where you're from, that would be great. We always love to see where people are joining us from, which country from around the world, which province, which area of our regions. Before I turn you over to our esteemed presenters, let me share a few fun facts with you about GLI. Today is GLI's third webinar this year, and for those of you who are new to GLI, Global Leadership Initiatives is a Canadian leadership development organization, and we have over 36 world-class experts in leadership, sustainability, management, and team development from countries around the world like Canada, the US, Russia, South Africa, and China. GLI exists to develop excellence in leadership globally, and we do this through the 4I process of inquiry, intervention, impact, and iteration. This 4I approach to leadership development is achieved through the books we write, the courses we develop, the workshops, podcasts, and webinars we deliver like this one today. GLI leverages the best of leadership development theory and practice by bringing together researchers and coaches that will help individuals develop and positively impact organizations. If you want to learn more about GLI or become a member with us, please check out glimembers.ca. Just so you know, like I mentioned before, all of our participants are muted. However, again, just to remind those that are still joining us, if you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. I'll be monitoring that throughout the next hour and make sure that we get to your question. At this time, and before every GLI webinar, we do provide a land acknowledgement. Tomorrow's a national holiday in Canada, and this year is particularly poignant and makes this statement even more important. In the spirit of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, we here today acknowledge that we're gathering from a variety of traditional lands of Indigenous peoples from Canadian territories and beyond. We recognize all those many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We will continue to learn and listen from those who have walked these lands before us. Okay, let's get started. Today's session is an important one. The workplace over the last 16 months has been significantly impacted. Our teams have been thrown into a virtual world where many acclimatized, however, many also struggled. We're now slowly discussing, or maybe even returning to the workplace and to the office, depending on where you're located. Teamwork will be different with new members, some members not returning, and perhaps a new leader in place. As Tuckman described so many years ago, we'll also be needing to doing a little bit of norming, forming, maybe storming, before we get to performing again. Today, two of our expert consultants, Dr. Seth Silver and Dr. Timothy Franz, will be joining us to discuss their research and practice of meaningful partnership at work. In their book, they explore the concept of meaningful partnership in the workplace. They present meaningful partnership as a mindset where both leaders and their teams are fully committed to ensuring the support and success of the other. This enables leaders and teams to create mutual commitments with obligatory weight that help them to feel accountable for the success of their relationship and each other. I will let them discuss in more detail what this means and how it's applied in the workplace, as well as their new book coming out soon. Let me quickly introduce them to you though. Dr. Seth Silver is an organizational consultant. He's the principal of Silver Consulting Incorporated, an independent consulting practice where he's worked with over 200 client organizations in healthcare, higher education, high tech, government, business services, manufacturing, and nonprofit. His consulting focuses on two areas: developing and improving leadership and creating high engagement, high performance workplaces. He provides such services as executive coaching, leadership training, team development, conflict resolution, building effective workplace partnerships, strategic planning, and organization team diagnosis. Dr. Silver has developed a unique business process called the Workplace Covenant, which helps parties in any organization to exchange and agree upon reciprocal obligations and expectations so as to ensure trust, feedback, and alignment in their relationship. He has recently co-authored a book entitled Meaningful Partnership at Work: How the Workplace Covenant Ensures Mutual Accountability and Success Between Leaders and Teams, to bring the concept to a wider audience. From 2000 to 2014, Dr. Silver was a part-time assistant professor and taught master's level students in human resource development, teaching first at St. John Fisher College and then at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Dr. Silver holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Toronto, master's degree from Cornell University, and a doctorate from the George Washington University. He served on the board of directors for several nonprofit organizations in the Rochester area and is a citizen of both the US and Canada. Welcome, Dr. Silver. Next, we have Dr. Timothy Franz, who is a professor, a consultant, and an author. Tim Franz is an industrial and organizational psychologist at St. John Fisher College. He's a professor and interim chair of the Department of Psychology and past graduate program director of the Graduate Human Resource Development Program. He works as an organizational consultant through his consulting organization, Franz Consulting, and also with GLI. Prior to his work as a professor, Dr. Franz worked full-time as a human resources consultant. He earned his PhD in social organizational psychology from the University of Illinois at Chicago, his MA from the University of Buffalo, and his BA from SUNY Oineyata. I don't know how to pronounce that, sir. So I was trying to Google it last night. That was a mouthful. His area of expertise include applied research in organizations, individual and team decision-making, improving team performance, improving team leadership, and using teams to drive organizational change. Many of his ideas are about improving teams are published in his 4 books titled Meaningful Partnership at Work, Making Team Projects Work, Making Team Projects Work in High School and College Students, and Group Dynamics and Team Interventions. Many great publications that you can speak with him more about. For more information about his work, you can find it at teambuildingprocess.com. Dr. Silver and Dr. Franz, I'm now going to hand the presentation over to you both. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having us, Laura.
Yeah, thank you. Oneonta. Thank you very, very much for a wonderful introduction, Laura. I'd like to start and first of all, welcome everybody, and start with what Tim and I call the origin story of where the idea for this book and what we're about to talk about this morning came from. A long time ago, I was working in a high-tech company here in upstate New York, and I was an internal consultant, and my role was to work with engineering and development teams and help them perform better and improve leadership. And one of the great fun things I got to do was do team building. And so I would do due diligence, and I would meet with the manager before engaging in the team building, usually a couple of weeks before, to understand the issues and understand how I could shape the team building to best help that manager and the team. And I would review how things were going, and inevitably I would ask, how are things going in your relationship with your team? And again, this was a one-on-one meeting, and the manager would say, well, they're pretty good, but I wish they were more organized. I wish they would deal with issues before coming to me and whining about it. I wish they were better prepared for operations reviews. I wish that they could handle these problems. I wish they didn't gossip. I wish they didn't send each other notes during meetings, etc. And so I heard this wish list, and then I would meet with the team and I would do the focus group, and the manager, of course, wasn't present. And I would ask the team how things were going. And eventually the question came up, how are things in relationship to your manager? And the team would always say, well, he or she is pretty good, but we wish. And then came the team wish list. We wish our manager gave us more recognition. We wish our manager understood the issues we face outside of work. We wish our manager could advocate and fill open slots, or get us the resources we need, or introduce us to the people we need to be introduced to. And so it occurred to me these wishes were not being exchanged with each other. There was implicit expectations and implicit needs that were not being discussed. And that led me to start holding sessions where the manager and the team would have the opportunity in a safe, structured way to share with each other what they most needed to feel supported and be successful. So as we go to the next slide, and you see this cartoon here, this really captures it. because you can see the manager is bailing and the team members are saying, well, it's a good thing it's his or her problem, the manager's problem. And so I encountered, and later on when I left the company and started consulting and Tim and I started to work together, this situation came up over and over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day. The manager would feel abandoned or not supported, or the team didn't have his or her back. But it also was the case, probably more often, frankly, that the team felt the manager wasn't supporting them, and the team felt abandoned, or the team felt that the manager didn't understand or have empathy for their situation. And so both, again, were not sharing what they most needed from each other. And I kind of joked with someone the other day, if I had a quarter for every time I've met a manager who was disappointed and frustrated with his or her team, or a quarter for every team that was disappointed or frustrated with their manager, I'd have an awful lot of quarters. It's a two-way street of frustration. That's the problem here. Tim, I'm going to throw it to you to get us warmed up.
So we are going to start with a little reflection for all of you to do. And this is very similar to what we do when we're working with clients to kick off a session and get them thinking about this idea of meaningful partnership. It's really an intentional way to get people to start to think about it. So I'd like you all to grab a piece of paper and make a T-chart. And on one side, I'd like you to put the worst partnership you've had, and on the other side, the best partnership. And I'd like you to list the attributes and pick any partnership. It could be your boss, it could be a key work partner, it could be with your team or a colleague, and it could be with a vendor or a client. Pick one for the worst, pick one for the best, and then list the attitudes, behaviors, and any other attributes that made it so good or bad. So we're going to give you 3 minutes to do that. Just over a minute left. It's 30 seconds. Okay, take a few seconds and finish up. Make sure you have some attributes on each side of that T-chart. And I'm going to ask for some input first about the worst partnership and then about the best partnership. So if you have something to contribute, feel free to unmute at this point. I'd like to hear 4 of the attributes first about the worst partnership. So feel free to unmute and contribute 4 of them from your list. And I don't have everybody's names on the screen, so
Morning.
I can't pick on people.
Hi,
What
Tim.
was that?
Hi,
Hey,
Tim.
Alan.
Nice
How
to
are you?
see you. I'm doing very well, thanks.
Good to see you, even if it's virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. So regarding, for the worst attributes, the first one I said was I was ignored.
Okay,
Um,
great one,
I-
Ali.
yeah.
Ignored. Okay, so let's hear from another person. One of them, ignored. That's a great one. Thank you.
Hi, this is Jennifer Smathers. Nice to see you both.
Good to see you too.
uh, in addition to there being sexual harassment of others, there was also a lack of accountability.
Lack of accountability. Good. Okay, a third one. I see Thomas is unmuting.
Hi,
Okay.
it's Cece.
Hi, Cece.
I can give one of mine.
Mhm.
There was no respect.
No respect. Okay, and one final one, very quickly.
Hi, this is Jean Rollins. I would say that there was not equal level of commitment to the partnership or to the project on both sides.
Good, an excellent one. Thanks, Jean, and nice to hear from you too. Okay, so some of the worst partnerships. Now, after today, hopefully you'll have some tools to take some of those worst partnerships in the future and move them to better or even the best partnerships. So let's very quickly hear 4 attributes of the best partnerships you've had.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, this is
ahead.
Munjalo.
Okay, Manchalo, good to hear from you.
Hi, I said outgoing.
Outgoing, good. Okay, and Denise, I saw you were getting ready to.
Yep, I would say mutual trust.
Mutual trust, an important one. Good.
I have here encouragement.
Encouraging one another. Excellent. And last one.
Made time for me.
Making time, carving out that important time. Great. This is what we are talking about when we're talking about the best partnerships. We're going to be talking more about the importance of having these meaningful partnerships, why we need these. And Seth will be talking about that next.
Thanks, Tim. So we know from the research on workplace engagement, which has been going on for literally 30 plus years, and all sorts of other social science and organizational research, that relationship between a manager and a team is absolutely pivotal. It is perhaps the key driver behind engagement, which is measured now in lots of ways: retention, effort, quality, customer service, performance, all kinds of things that organizations care about comes down to that relationship between a manager and a team. And I think as you thought about the partnerships, perhaps some of you were thinking about the relationship you had with a manager. Certainly you can do that now as I'm talking, and realize that that relationship, the quality of it, affected how you felt about the job, the organization, your role, perhaps even yourself. So we know now that important relationship is key. As I learned when I was doing that team building and talking to managers and teams, there are so many implicit needs and expectations that don't seem to get shared. And these unheld conversations lead to what we call the dreaded 4 Ds. And respectively, the first one is dissatisfaction. I think what happens at work when people experience being ignored and not being respected and all the things you listed that were negative is they start to feel dissatisfied. And if that continues over time, weeks or months, then I believe people begin to feel disengaged. And again, the research suggests that you start to care less about your work, you start looking around for other opportunities, you're less involved and just mind present at work. So the dissatisfaction leads to disengagement, eventually leading, if nothing changes over months, to despair. Strong word, but basically it means you're beginning to really check out, that you're feeling depressed, you're feeling like you're on that treadmill going nowhere. And when people feel that sense of despair and that they're wasting their time, their energy, their life, that's when they depart. And so that's when they look for other things. Particularly now, I think this is relevant in our economy as we see things coming out of COVID. The focus on attracting and keeping good people is even more important than it was before. Tim, I'm going to transition to you at this point.
So to continue this need for meaningful partnership, as Seth said, employees don't feel supported, appreciated, or able to achieve. Managers don't feel supported, appreciated, or fully able to achieve. It's back to what Seth said earlier, this two-way street of frustration that results from those unstated expectations, the I wish, I wish, I wish, which got worse for many employees during COVID. Now, meaningful partnership depends on this idea of reciprocal support. Look back to that canoe cartoon. When we don't support one another, when we don't feel supported, we feel abandoned, uncertain, less capable, overwhelmed, afraid, maybe even angry. And those dreaded 4Ds that Seth just talked about happen. Now, on the other hand, when we do feel fully supported, we know we can do our best. We know that our meaningful partners have our back. They understand what our needs and expectations are, and they can do things to help us succeed. It helps to create that deep human craving for that partnership. So in our term, meaningful partnership means that both parties feel fully supported and able to achieve. It's not like that canoe cartoon. Instead, it's two in a canoe, people paddling smoothly together towards a common goal, a common purpose. And it creates this elevated state of cohesion, connection, and collaboration, where one of the words we heard about problem partnerships is no accountability. This will help to create mutual accountability for the success and health of the relationship. So I'm going to turn it over to Seth, who is going to talk next about our model.
So we've written this book, Meaningful Partnership at Work. We wrote it largely during the COVID vacation, as I like to joke. And this triangle really summarizes what the book is about. I think Tim and I would agree, this is the elevator speech on the book. And we started with a focus on the base level there, the medium. And we did later on emerge with this mindset model and medium, but we kind of started it backwards. We knew the tool worked. Both of us have used this in our practice for a long time. In my case, over 20 years. It goes back to that, mid-1990s experience at the high-tech company and evolved over time with various clients. And Tim and I started to work together and use this tool, which we'll explain momentarily. So the book was originally a description of that, but as we wrote the book, other things began to emerge. It's just kind of that discovery when you start writing that other things happen. I think Michelangelo has described this as, he started to sculpture in a piece of rock and all of a sudden the statue David emerged. In some ways, that was the book. So we started with a focus on the tool, the process by which two parties can have this conversation about mutual expectations and, as it turns out, obligations. We then realized that the goal was this mindset of meaningful partnership, this elevated state of cohesion, connection, coordination, and collaboration. And credit to Tim, he came up with the word meaningful because we're talking about a level of partnership that is distinct. It's above and beyond. It has significance. It has impact. In the book, we talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg briefly, the Supreme Court Justice who dedicated her whole life to women's rights and how her life had significance and meaning because of its impact. So the mindset of meaningful partnership is the goal. The soil in which that takes root is what we call ERTAP, E-R-T-A-P, empathy, respect, trust, and alignment at a basic level of partnership. And Tim will be getting more into that shortly. But that's the model that underpins this. And we know, and we've measured, that the medium, the process, this workplace covenant idea, helps to create the conditions of E, R, T, and A and P. So with that, I will transition to Tim to talk more about ERTAP.
Seth introduced the concept of ERTAP: empathy, respect, trust, alignment, and partnership. And of course, if we have these things, our team and of course our organization will improve. So our little diagram here, the workplace covenant process, can help to increase empathy. Empathy is this profound appreciation for the perspective of others, where you can understand and feel for their challenges and know how important they are to you. With this empathy, you can then gain respect for the work they do. Respect in a work context is when someone sees another, their partner, as a valid and legitimate work partner, and they deserve the rights that we expect of ourselves. And we would like to cooperate and work with them in order to be more successful at work. Once we have this foundation of empathy and respect, then comes the trust within the partnership. Trust implies confidence in people at work. It means they're not going to speak ill of you. It means they're going to deliver on what they've said, and they will, as I said before, have your back. And then finally, with this foundation of empathy, respect, and then trust, we can start to build alignment, where the team and a leader or two work partners can come together, two in a canoe, rowing in that same direction towards a common goal. It implies cohesion in the partnership, collaboration between the partners, and vigorous team coordination working towards that common goal. Now, we've described these as sequential. Certainly, empathy is the first step, and it can help build that respect and then that trust and into that alignment, and then slowly move from a partnership to a true meaningful partnership. But it's not rigid. We do recognize that these are mutually reinforcing. Having more respect and trust can certainly build empathy too. So it's the covenant process that helps people to build this empathy, respect, and trust that are the foundations for alignment and partnership that improve performance. So, like before, we have a little reflection exercise. This one's a little longer. Take out a piece of paper, type on your computer, type onto your phone, whatever you need to do. We have 4 questions for you to consider in this 5 minutes. Number 1, when have you experienced empathy from a work partner? How did it improve respect? Number 2, when have you had respect for or from a work partner, and how did it lead to more trust? Number 3, when have you been involved in this trusting relationship, and how did it help you to become more aligned? And finally, how has alignment with a partner deepened your level of partnership? So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and I'm going to go on mute and let you have your time here. 2 minutes left. Okay, I'm watching faces on the video for those who have their camera on, and it looks like most people are done. So I'm going to move to the next step. I hope that you saw this foundational process of empathy, respect, trust, alignment, and how they lead to partnership. Now, if we were doing this with an organization or a client, we'd have small groups right now. We'd organize on Zoom breakout rooms, but we're going to skip that today because we want to respect your time during this webinar. So at this point, we've been talking around this workplace covenant process that can help you, your team, and your organization build ERTAP and improve performance. And now I'm going to turn it over to Seth to talk more about this. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. This workplace covenant process, as Seth said in the origin story, it started out as his idea, and he has brought me along for the ride. It's been a great ride with Seth, learning about this. I've been on client engagements with him. I've done this myself, and now we have a book about it and really developed this. But he is going to define and explain what this workplace covenant process is.
Thanks, Tim. You did mention we also have a covenant, you and I. So the word covenant here is not religious. I just want to emphasize that because people have questioned the use of that word, but it does refer to a binding promise. And Laura mentioned it quickly in her introduction. Obligatory weight. We believe the commitments and exchanged promises have obligatory weight. So I want to read something actually from the book that is probably the best description. The workplace covenant is a practical relationship building process that equips any two parties who have an important work relationship to establish and continuously improve their connection and collaboration by exchanging obligations and expectations, refining these into respective covenants, and then using these covenants in various structured ways to provide routine praise and feedback. Both parties adjust to help the other feel more supported and be successful. In other words, the workplace covenant helps create meaningful partnership. So we want to take a couple-minute deep dive here into really how this works. In some ways, this is the training part of our webinar today. So you'll note that there's manager questions and there are team questions. And I want you to focus for a moment on the wording here, right? Key behavioral attitudinal obligations I have to my team so they will feel supported and can be successful. And similarly, the team has behavioral attitudinal obligations to the manager so he or she will feel, so he or she will feel supported and can be successful. This notion of support is intrinsic. We had this epiphany writing the book that empathy, respect, trust, and alignment, in many ways, they fall under the umbrella of support. If you think about a time where you were miffed with your boss, probably it's because the boss was not supporting you. If you think of a time when you left a job voluntarily, perhaps it was the manager or the organization that didn't support you in some way or other. If you've ever been miffed with your team and you're a manager, perhaps the reason was the team didn't support you. So this notion of support is intrinsic and it's baked right into our questions. And as Tim noted earlier, when people feel supported, they tend to do their best work, they stay, they give it their all, and they connect. And this notion of support is basic, I believe, to how we feel about ourselves and how we connect to the organization. So looking at the questions, I'm going to have Tim actually move to the next slide. And here's where we do the compare and contrast. So the manager outlines, what do I owe my team so they will feel supported and can be successful? And just think about what a manager might say there. I owe them coaching, I owe them support, I owe them resources, I owe them critical information in a timely way. I owe them advocacy with the levels above, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that a manager would believe he or she should do to help the team feel supported and be successful. And then we compare that and contrast that with the team's expectation list. What are the expectations we have of our manager so we will feel supported and can be successful? So what would a team come up with? We want to be appreciated. And when we go above and beyond, we want the manager to note that. We want the manager to fight for us to get the resources we need to do our job. We want the manager to recognize we have a life outside of work, and that's important to us. And so every now and then we got to go to a kid's soccer game or a daughter dance recital, right? So there are expectations that the team will have of the manager. And what happens is that those lists tend to be very close. They tend to be about 60 or 70% overlap, and that's good. The more overlap, the better. But where there are differences, that's the basis of discussion. And so a manager might have an obligation that the team never thought of, and the team will say, gee, we haven't thought of that one, but thanks for providing it. Or the team might have an expectation of the manager, and the manager will say, gee, that's not on my list anywhere. I didn't realize that was a key expectation. I better be sensitive to it. So next slide. So then what happens is we do what's called the combine and refine. That's the next step in this process. So we take those two lists, the manager's obligations, the team's expectations, we've compared and contrasted. And what we do is we make sure that every one of those expectations that the team has of the manager is baked into that manager obligation list. It's either covered in spirit or in exact wording, or it's a natural sub-bullet because we're actually creating a one-page 10-item document here. We make sure that every single one of those expectations is in some ways included in the manager obligation list. And when that is done, that is the manager's covenant, small c, to the team. That is the set of promises and behaviors the manager has signed up for, which the manager will self-review. The team will give feedback to that manager on. Next slide. But it's a two-way street, right? We've kept talking about how it's a two-way street. So now the team has obligations to the manager. By the way, this is where I think team building sometimes falls apart. Sometimes it's only focused on the needs of the team or only on the needs of the manager. This process is the needs of both. Both are regarded as equal partners in terms of the workplace partnership. So we have the team's obligations to the manager so that the manager, him or her, will feel supported and can be, hey boss, we owe you timely information. We owe you letting you know when there's problems before they get too big. We owe you accomplishing the goals we've set out to do. We owe you taking responsibility for our professional development. We owe you keeping you informed, etc. We owe you working together as a team and representing the team well outside of the immediate organization. And then there's the expectations the manager has of that team. I expect the team to do what they say they'll do. I expect them to keep me informed. I expect them to work well together. I expect them to solve problems, etc. So again, we compare and contrast those two lists. Next slide. Then we do the combine and refine again. So we make sure that all of the manager's expectations are embedded and baked into that team obligation list, either covered in substance or in close wording, or we add it as a sub-bullet, or we even add it as a brand new item. Because again, there's going to be about 70% overlap, but we want to make sure it's all covered. So now the team's obligation list has been modified and edited. It has included all of the manager's expectations. And so we've combined and refined them, and that team refined obligation list, that's the team's covenant to the manager. That's the set of 10 promises, 8 to 10 promises that they will self-review, hold themselves accountable on, and the manager will give them feedback. One other thought, an epiphany that Tim and I have had while writing the book. We use the word accountability a great deal in organizations. There can be no accountability unless there's clear and agreed to expectations, right? How can you hold someone accountable unless they're aware of the expectation that is of them and they have agreed to it? So there's no question this process enhances the whole notion of accountability. So as indicated, the manager has created a covenant. It's a set of merged, confirmed, and signed obligations to the team, literally signed, John Doe, here's the date. And the manager agrees to reflect on that. The manager agrees to give him or herself feedback on it from time to time. And the manager agrees to have the team give feedback to the manager from time to time, typically about every 3 months, but informally at any point. The team in turn has its obligation list, which has been modified. They now have a covenant to the manager, and the team members agree that they will review it, they'll self-reflect, they'll give themselves feedback, and they'll also accept feedback from the manager, formally at least once every 2 or 3 months, informally from time to time. Okay, so Tim, next chart.
We're going to do one more reflection exercise here, and this time I am going to ask for your feedback, so make sure you're ready to unmute and talk. We'd like to hear what you have to say. We can't have you do a covenant here because your key work partner's not here, and certainly when we do this, it would take far more than 3 minutes. It takes 20, 30, a team even longer at times. But we'd very quickly like to hear maybe what your key obligations to a work partner would be, so that they would, remember important terms, feel supported and can be successful. It's not all, as Seth said, it's not all team building and a trust fall. It's about being successful at work. It's about being accountable. It's about getting the job done. And fewer, 4 to 6 key expectations of a key work partner that you feel would help to help support you, and so you could be successful. And I'm going to skip the last one for this, Seth. Now, when you're, again, a reminder, when you're thinking about that key work partner, it can be your boss, it can be your team, it can be your colleague, it can be a client, whatever works for you. Think about one key work partner, and then what are your obligations and expectations? And I'm going to ask for 3 obligations to hear across 3 people and 3 expectations to hear about from 3 other people. So be ready to unmute when we come back. I'll give you a time warning again when it's 1 minute. Just over a minute left. About 15 seconds to finish what you're writing, and then be ready to share either an obligation or an expectation. We always start with obligations, as Seth said. So I want to hear 3 obligations first. Obligations that you have to a key work partner so that they will feel supported and can be successful. So give me 3 very quickly.
Hi.
I heard somebody talking, but I lost that person.
Hi.
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the two Jennifers are trying to talk at the same time. Just ignore us. An obligation I have is to make sure that my partner has the necessary things they need to do the whatever, the times, the tools, the training.
Great one. Appreciate that, Jennifer. And then the other Jennifer.
Hi, Jen Dexheimer here. I would say communicating a need for help when it's there.
Excellent. Yes. And one more.
I was going to say being responsive.
Okay. Be responsive. Great. So these are common things, and you might have many others on your list, or you may have similar things to this. The obligations lists are very personal to you and your team. Same with those expectations lists. So I want to hear again 3 expectations that you might have of a key work partner so that you will feel supported and can be successful. So very quickly, 3 different people.
Hi, this is Julie Day.
Thanks, Julie.
And I feel, especially in this environment, that my work partner is mindful of not only what might be going on at work, but also at home. And I know a key work partner that I rely on quite heavily has an elderly parent, as I do. So we've really been able to make a solid connection there and help each other to get through some tough times.
Great. That's a great one, Julie. Okay, somebody else.
Okay. Yes, I'm Ilza. What I expect from my partner is a great communication and feedback to have the support, because sometimes they don't give feedback, and for me, feedback
Nice
is
one.
essential.
Feedback is the breakfast of champions. A quote I learned from my friend Seth. And one more. CC, go ahead.
This is CC. I have to be included in the decision-making process when the results would affect, especially when the results would affect my role or my job.
That's an excellent one. I love that one, CC. Thank you very much. So you can see these kinds of obligations and expectations are often, as Seth said earlier, unstated and implicit. And this workplace covenant process helps to make these explicit, stated, and they are, as Seth foreshadowed, part of an ongoing process of discussion, dialogue, and feedback, where people are willing to receive feedback on how well they're doing this. Seth talked about the first 4 steps in the workplace covenant process. And really, we built the workplace covenant process around the PDCA idea. If you haven't heard that, it's from project management. We talk about P, the plan part, in the book. We left that out of this discussion. Plan, do, and check and adjust. And the workplace covenant that Seth talked about was part of the do. But there's also an ongoing check and adjust process. You've created a workplace covenant, and it doesn't end there. And this, to me, was one of the biggest breakthroughs when Seth introduced this concept to me back in the early 2000s, is that the workplace covenant isn't a one-shot do an OD, organization development exercise, and expect it to work. It is something that is ongoing and becomes a routine part of a leader and a team's conversation. So the check and adjust, people spend time, you post that covenant up, you embrace and integrate it into the things you're doing. and then you review and calibrate. And so part of the review is formal every 2 to 4 month reviews. Generally, at the beginning, these are done by an external facilitator, but as all good organization development consultants, the goal here is to work yourself out of business and turn it over to the leader and team to do their own reviews. So it becomes part of the routine check-ins, and those routine check-ins are very fast moving on forward. I'm doing well at this, I can do better at this. And I hear that you say I could do better at that other thing. And then another thing is the idea of evaluating and validating how people are doing on this. Measurement helps people to stay on track. And so moving to the idea of measurement, we developed this covenant process, and it's not just simply something that we know from anecdotes. Instead, we have two different studies. We have a pilot study that we're not going to discuss today, and a longitudinal study that shows how well these workplace covenants work at improving teamwork in an organization. And so what we did was we measured quite a few team measurements before teams started a workplace covenant process. And then we measured again at the first review, and then we measured again at the second review, and then we measured again at the third review. So at 2 to 3 months, at 4 to 6 months, and then 6 to 8 months, we tested how well the team was doing. For those of you who like statistics, like me, the college professor, these were tested with one-way ANOVAs. And you can see here, alignment went up, partnership went up, team performance went up, and conflict went down. And again, for the stats people in here, alignment, partnership, and conflict are all P less than 0.01 on the one-way within subjects ANOVAs, and team performance did not reach traditional levels of statistical significance, but it was P equal to 0.08, close and in the right direction with a very small sample size. So that's our longitudinal research showing that the covenant does actually improve alignment and partnership. And now I'm going to turn it over to Seth, who's going to wrap up on why you'd want to do a workplace covenant process, why you'd want to improve meaningful partnership, and what it would mean for your team and the development of your organization.
Thanks, Tim. So just before I talk about the benefits, I just want to sort of conceptually go back 3 slides. You don't have to move the slides, Tim, but as you look at those first 4 steps of the workplace covenant process, that's about a 2 to 3 hour workshop. Recall that this emerged from an engineering environment, and we've always had a little bit of that mentality in mind as we've proceeded with this tool and refined it over time and worked with different groups. And so those first 4 steps of initiate and create and combine and refine and compare and contrast and all that, literally 2 to 3 hours. That's the efficient part. And then the reflections and the reviews all respectively are minutes, maybe 90 minutes for a formal review. So the whole thing is very efficient and has enormous leverage. It's kind of a fulcrum, if you will. I mean, a small thing leads to a big thing. Let's talk briefly here about the benefits. So one key benefit is the quality of leadership goes up. Tim and I have seen this anecdotally so many times. It's also talked about in our book. We have a number of instances in the book where we tell real stories where a manager went through this because of issues or because they just wanted to go from great to superb. It always elevates the level of leadership. They're getting feedback. How could it not? Okay, for those of you who are in HR, and I recognize some names here, we've got Ale and Julie and Gene Rollins and others. You know that leaders typically, managers typically get maybe a performance review once a year, maybe every 3 years they do a 360. But in general, they're not getting a lot of feedback. With this process, they're literally getting week to week, month to month, informal feedback from their team and formal feedback from their team at least every 3 months. So there's no question, this makes leaders better leaders because they're more sensitive. They're more sensitive. They're making these micro adjustments on a more routine basis to what their team needs from them in order to feel supported and be successful. So leadership improves, teamwork improves because the teams are getting feedback. The managers are providing that same routine micro adjustment feedback to the teams. The team members individually are getting feedback from the manager on the covenant. In one-on-ones, the manager is able to share how that individual is doing with respect to the covenant and provide that kind of, attitudinal and behavioral advice and counsel and suggestion and feedback. And then the team itself has to have these conversations. This gets back to accountability. Accountability depends on clear expectations. So there's an accountability issue here because the team is able to have this conversation with itself about how well have we performed to our covenant. We signed up for these things 3 months ago. Now we're taking the opportunity to reflect, give ourselves feedback, and get feedback from the manager. So it promotes this self-directedness, if you will, on the part of the team. So there's no question, leadership goes up, teamwork goes up. I would argue teamwork maturity goes up because they're able to self-assess and make these changes on their own. But perhaps most importantly, the culture changes. What's happening with this process over time is there's more dialogues about the quality of relationship. And that's something that I think in most organizations is not discussed enough, hence issues of retention and engagement and all that stuff. So having a regular conversation in a safe, structured way about the quality of the professional relationship and what we need to do for each other to increase support and help each other perform better is huge. It also strengthens something called psychological safety. That's a new term that's come out in the organizational research in the last 5 years. And it basically refers to the ability for people to voice an opinion and not feel they're going to be judged or ostracized or kicked out or thought less of. They're able to raise creative and innovative and out there ideas that are relevant. So it strengthens that. And that's been shown, the more psychological safety, the better teams perform. Google's done some great research on that. It also, frankly, ensures there's regular appreciation and praise. Right now in most organizations, that's anecdotal. Some people do it, some people don't. We all wish more of it would happen. This forces the opportunity for a team to give its manager praise and compliments and thanks. And it forces the manager to give the team thanks, praise, and acknowledgments. So that forcing, if you will, of the opportunity to say, hey, this is going really well, I appreciate that, or this is going great, or you're really good at this, that's important. That creates a positive culture. What Tim and I like to call a culture by choice as opposed to a culture by default. Too many organizations don't care about their culture. If workplace covenants and mindset of partnership and attention to the ERTAP model are important, then we begin to create what we call a culture by intent, by design. And we're thinking proactively about what kind of experience do we want our employees and our managers, and therefore also our customers to have. Okay, Tim?
Thank you all for being a part of this webinar today. I hope you have some ideas for how to improve meaningful partnership in your team as a leader in an organization and to create, as Seth said, that culture by choice. At this point, we are happy to take any questions.
Dr. Franz, there's a question from Kadek. They're asking how to maintain a meaningful partnership at work. Any 1 minute quick tip for that?
Well, the way to maintain it is part of that check and adjust. It's this ongoing feedback process that the workplace covenant provides. Regular ongoing reviews. Generally, it helps to have a third-party facilitator to do the first one and preferably 2, maybe even 3. But after that, it's working with the team and the leader to create their own. And also making these part of the everyday conversations, posting that covenant on your wall. It's signed. It is a reminder, typed covenant with your signature, what you owe your key work partner, your leader, your team, whoever else that might be. Seth, anything to add?
Jokingly, I'd say read the book. The book really talks about how to ensure that relationships start off and then sustain and stay at a level of meaningful partnership. I will say, just speaking to reality, that partnerships will go up and down. I mean, think of a marriage, think of an important relationship you have. There's going to be natural up and downs. And to use an analogy we use in the book, and some financial person said this, the stock market is like a yo-yo going up and down on an upward moving escalator. With this process, you're on an upward moving escalator of the quality of your partnership. Empathy, respect, trust, and alignment improve if you have covenants, if you refer to them, reflect on them, give yourself feedback on them, and give your partner feedback on them. Having said that, there's always day-to-day up and downs. And so what I would say is that the workplace covenant process, the mindset of meaningful partnership, allows you to get through those tougher times, to really hear each other, to come back to the common goal of support and helping your partner achieve. And it gets you through those tough times without letting problems fester. It allows you to discuss them in a structured and safe way that preserves the quality of relationship while you get through the issue of the day or the issue of the moment.
Dr. Silver, there's a couple other questions that are coming up. Jennifer's asking if there's any hacks for using this process with people who are incapable of empathy.
By the way, Jennifer, I love that question. I've got the chat up on another window, and I think that's a fabulous question. And I have an answer, but I'll let Seth take it first. So
I'll go first, Tim, you jump in. So we do address this, and I'm not sure if you're referring to a manager who lacks empathy or a team member who lacks empathy. If it's a team member, I'd say they kind of get swept by the tide. And if all of their peers have signed the covenant, that's going to generally move them in the right direction, and the subtle peer pressure will help them to kind of conform to behaving to their covenant. If it's a manager who lacks it, I think this process enhances, you're assuming they lack empathy because perhaps that conversation hasn't happened. We note in the book that maybe 2 or 3% of the managers we've encountered are truly so narcissistic, so dysfunctional, so egotistical, and so immature that they can't do this. But the other 97% tend to be capable of it if there's an outside facilitator, they understand the process, they're clear on what the goals are, and they understand how it's going to benefit them. Think of the hockey team, to use a Canadian example. If the hockey team does well, the coach does well. If the coach does well, the team does well. That's a partnership. And so a manager will understand that he or her is going to be improved because their team will improve, and it's worth it for them to engage in this process. Tim.
It's also behavioral. I am going to communicate with my team, send a message summarizing what's going on in my department once each week, every Friday. Seth and I just had that with a client we were working, that we're still working with, actually. There will be an email every Friday. This is a measurable behavioral objective. It's easy to test if you're doing that. It's easy to give feedback. It's good. You're doing okay. You're not doing so well on this. And so you don't need empathy for the behavioral ones. It tells people what they need to do to continue, as Seth said. It very selfishly, it's more than just me feeling supported. It's me being successful. If I'm a team leader, how can I be successful? I can help my team be more successful too. So.
Thanks, Dr. Franz, and thanks, Dr. Silver. We have one more question in here, 2 more questions actually. So I did put a post in the chat about your new book that is available for pre-order. However, someone, Cece's asking if there's any additional specific tools in the book that might be available for folks should they want more information.
Tim, you want to take that with the surveys?
Sure. We do have some additional tools. So one of the things that we talked about in our webinar here was this idea of measuring alignment and partnership. And when Seth and I first did our research, we realized there's no measures of team alignment and team partnership. And so we created measures of team alignment and team partnership. And I am sorry, Cece, I am gonna apologize today, right now. They will be up on our website soon. We just haven't gotten to putting them up, but the reality is they need to be there. We've said in the book they're there. We have slides for how to run a covenant process. We have a lot of stories for how we've specifically gone through with clients on running it. So there's a lot of different pieces to it in the book and available on our website soon.
Yeah, Tim, I'd like to add to that.
Once you get the book, they will definitely be there. So.
Yeah, also in the book are other examples. While it primarily focuses on the leader-team relationship, there's a whole chapter on other applications, whether it's a nonprofit board to the senior staff of the nonprofit, whether it's a faith-based organization and their board to the relationship of the clergy, whether it's a professor to a class, whether it's 2 teams that have to work closely together, or 2 teams in a project management situation that need to collaborate in the project management process. So there's a number of other applications. We also in a chapter talk about what could go wrong. And we talk about the issues where we have found challenges and what we learned from it and how we resolved it at the time. So it's a realistic snapshot of how this process can work with a team. And we do advocate that you use a third party, whether that's an HR person who's trained in this or an outside person at first. But as Tim said, this is designed to be transferred. This is designed to be self-managing. So after the third review, you do the original workshop, then you'd have 1 or 2 or 3 workplace covenant reviews. Then the baton is passed to the team and the third party person should step out. That's the ideal. Other questions?
There's one more question in here, and it's from Nilsa. How to deal with competitivity in a team without damaging relationships? So maybe how to deal with competition in a team without damaging relationships?
Well, one of the ways, Nilsa, is not only can we have covenants from a leader to a team, which is the primary focus and the primary discussion, but again, I'm going to go back to the client we're working with right now, and we're working with 2 where we've done this. We have a leader-team covenant in both of these organizations. In one of them, we have already worked with them to develop a peer covenant among the team members. And in the second organization, I forget when we scheduled it. We scheduled it yesterday, September sometime. We will also be working with them to develop a peer covenant. So not only do they have their leader team important work partnership covenant, they also have one across their team members where they have a safe way to give each other feedback and hopefully accept that feedback. So Seth, anything to add?
No, that's exactly where I would go. It's a peer covenant, and it's what we owe each other in order for all of us to feel supported and be successful. And that's the opportunity in that discussion to talk about peer-to-peer competition as opposed to collaboration. And I just want to emphasize something, and I think Tim and I have experienced this personally when we worked on our covenant, which is how certain things that you'd normally be uncomfortable raising become all of a sudden very safe. And it's truly remarkable. It's magic pixie dust. It's Harry Potter's wand in action. But things that you would be a little hesitant to talk about with your boss or your partner or the manager and the team, certain things, whether it's competition or whether it's financial things, whatever the key points are, they suddenly become a whole lot safer to discuss in the context, framework, and rubric of a workplace covenant. Because now you've been given license to have this open, candid conversation about what we need from each other to support each other and help each other succeed. And so all of a sudden, everything's on the table, and you just don't need to feel as guarded because we're coming from the same place. And so I just want to emphasize that we've seen this so many times, we've experienced it. There is a safety in the conversation that could, I would argue, hardly ever happen anytime else. So there's a magic quality to this too.
All right, folks, I'm going to wrap us up as we are past 11 o'clock, and thank you everybody for sticking around with us. I certainly learned a lot this morning. Someone who's researched teams and team development myself, I always love finding a few more nuggets, and I really loved your statement around accountability needs clear expectations. You can't expect things from people and hold them accountable if you don't lay out those expectations. So that was my sort of key nugget takeaway. Thank you. And thanks everybody for participating. We had people coming in today from North Carolina, Rochester, Phoenix, South Africa, Toronto, Whitby, and Montreal in Canada, Pretoria in South Africa. And that's why I love working with GLI and the places that we're able to reach in terms of folks joining us and sharing this information collaboratively and globally. If you want to learn more about GLI, check out our website at glimembers.com, and where you can have access to free coaching, leadership development courses, and our leadership forum where you can actually interact with more folks like Dr. Silver and Dr. Franz going forward. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you took away a few nuggets or two for yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
All
you.
the best.